Now that we have drawn our eye, it's time to start adding color to that, as well as highlights and shadows. So let's go ahead and begin. The first thing we want to do is we want to import the color palette that I've created for this lecture. So in the resources, you can download the PNG file, and you can see right here, I have it pulled up in Photoshop, and it has a transparent background, and all I have to do is just go ahead and select that, or I can actually just grab the actual layer and drag that into my other folder or file. I'm going to move that out of the way like this. So these are going to be the colors we're going to be working with for this entire eye drawing. We might grab a couple of colors in between these, but for the most part, these are the colors we're going to be using, and we're going to stick to these. I did this to keep it nice and simple for you guys, but when you're doing your own paintings, you're going to learn how to choose your own colors. But for now, we're just going to stick with this color palette. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is we want to add in a background. So let's go ahead and come here to our layer 1, which is our background, and I'm just going to go ahead and use my color picker or my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select this color right there. So now I have that color selected. You can see right down here and over here in my color tray. And using a fill tool, so this is just a paint bucket tool. Every software should have something like this, and we can just go ahead and click the background and it'll fill that in with that green color. All right, so now this looks kind of funny because we haven't added in our skin tones yet. We have this orangish brown color for the drawing. So what we want to do next is add a new layer. So in your Photoshop or whatever software you're using, there should be a way to add a new layer. And we want to make sure that that layer is underneath this eye drawing right here. So on this new layer, we're going to start adding in some of our base colors. So when you start doing digital paintings, you almost always want to start by adding in your base colors. So we're going to start with skin tone. So I'm going to go ahead and use my eyedropper tool again to select this color right here. So now I have that color selected. You can see it down there. And then just using a brush tool. And what we want to do is we want to select, let's come up into the general brushes, and we want to use this hard round pressure opacity brush. You want something similar to this if you're using a different software, but basically what this does is the harder you push, the more opaque your paint becomes, and the lighter you push, the more transparent. So let me show you what it does exactly. So you'll see that if I paint like that, I'm not pushing super hard, and so it's kind of transparent. It's mixing with the background color, but if I push harder, it becomes more opaque and I can see that color a lot more. This is going to allow us to blend very easily. This is the easiest way to blend in painting softwares. So let's go ahead and bring the size of our paintbrush down. Something right about here should be fine. And then let's go ahead and begin painting. So what I want to do is I basically just want to fill all of this area in with this skin tone. So you can see that I'm not pushing super hard and I'm just slowly layering it in. And that way we get a nice sort of painterly type of look. That's what we're going for. We want this to kind of actually look like paint. We can even fill all of this area in. We can go ahead and push a little bit harder and really make some of that paint nice and opaque, so we get that skin tone coming all the way through. Just like that. Maybe we'll add a little bit more color up here. Add some softer edges. And all I'm doing to create these softer edges is I'm just not pushing as hard. I'm just pushing very lightly on my drawing tablet. And that's what's creating that very opaque or transparent actually looking paint. It's just pushing lightly. All right, great. Next, let's go ahead and add in our next color. So our next color is going to be the white of the eyes. So using our color picker once again, we're just going to come up here and we're going to choose this color right up here in our color palette. So now we have that selected, and what we can do is we can start to paint in the white of the eyes. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down a little bit so I can get a smaller brush. And we're just going to paint it in just like this. And as you can see, our eye drawing, since we did it on a different layer, is transparent, and that's why we can see our color through it. Except for where the drawing actually is. So in these areas where we didn't draw, we can see the white coming through, but in these areas like this line right here or the iris, it doesn't come through as much because we drew there. All right, so we got that filled in. Let's add a little bit of shadow to this eye just as a base. So using our color picker, we're gonna come up here and we're gonna select this color right here. And let's go ahead and let's just start shading some of that in a little bit. So down here towards the bottom, as well as up here towards the top. Now, that might be a bit much. So using our color picker, let's go ahead and select our original white of the eye color. And let's just lightly paint on top of that. So I'm just not pushing very hard, and that's how I'm getting this nice blended edge. All right, great. Next, let's go ahead and fill in the color of our eye. So using our color picker, we're gonna come over here to this brown next to the yellow, select it, and we can go ahead and fill in the iris with that color. We can also go ahead and use this color and fill in the tear duct. Just like that. And then let's go ahead and let's select this pinkish color right here. We can also add some of that to the tear duct. And let's bring the brush size up. We can add a little bit of that up here in these shadow areas. We can add a little bit right here as well. And again, just remember that it's very much about pressure sensitivity. That's how I'm getting these sort of gradients, is by just not pushing as hard. So right here I'd push hard, and then over here I just push lightly. Get some right down here as well. Perfect. Now there's a lot of other colors in the face other than just these colors that we have right here. There's other colors that you might not think are in the skin tone, such as blue. So we want to make sure that we select some blue and put it in there as well. So right here we have this grayish blue color. I'm going to go ahead and select it, and I can go ahead and paint some of that in. So I'm going to put some right around here in the tear duct. I'm also going to put some right under here. And the reason why we get blue in the skin tones is because blood is actually blue until it gets cut and exposed. So when your skin gets cut and exposed to oxygen, that's when it turns red. It's kind of like oxidization, or it might actually be oxidization. I can't remember exactly. I just know that blood is actually blue, and that's why if you look at your veins, you can actually see that they're blue. So by adding a little bit of blue in the undertones of your painting, it's going to make it look a little bit more realistic. It tends to show up in areas where the skin is thinner. So right here we get pretty thin skin, same with right underneath the eye and the eyelids. You can maybe add a little bit up here on the top. Just something like that. Now lastly, let's go ahead and add in a little bit of some dark colors. So I'm going to go ahead and select a dark version of my skin tone. So using my color picker once again, I'm going to go ahead and just select this dark color right next to my original skin tone. And then we can go ahead and just start painting some of that in. So I'm just going to paint it right up here on the top of the eye. Now you're not going to see this come all the way through just because of our drawing, but in a second we're going to go ahead and blend this all together and make it one layer. You can add a little bit on this underside of the eyelid. Let's go ahead and lightly blend this up into this top area. Just not adding very much pressure and letting it stay nice and transparent. All right, great. So next what we want to do is we want to start blending this eye. So what we need to do is over here in our layers, we have two layers. We have the drawing layer. So you can see when I turn that off and on, it disappears. And we have the underpainting layer, which we just added, which just kind of added some basis for all our colors. And what we want to do is we want to select both of those. So in your software you're using, you want to select the layers and merge them. In Photoshop, all you do is you just select them and then you right click and hit merge layers. It might be different in your software, but all of them are going to have the ability to merge those layers together. And so what this means now is you can see when I turn that off and on, it's all one layer. It's all connected. If I were to do something like smudge these together, so if I grab the smudge tool, you'll see when I smudge it together, it smudges both of these layers together because now they're one. And that's exactly what we want. So next what we want to do is we actually want to start blending. So using our blending tool, which is just a tool that you can see, we can blend things together. It kind of blurs it together in a way. And in Photoshop, it's just going to be this little finger tool. You might have to hold down and switch it from the blur tool to the smudge tool. But whatever software you're working in, you're going to need to find the smudge tool. And we also want to control how much smudge there is. So you can see up here, it says strength. I have it at 5%. If I were to turn that up all the way to, let's say 71%, you'll see that it smudges way too much. And we don't want that much smudge. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And let's bring this back down to about 5%. So 5% will work perfect for what we're trying to do. So now let's go ahead, put our brush at about that size, and we can go ahead and just very lightly, don't put too much pressure on your tablet. You just want to very lightly drag your brush across to start blending these together. And as you can see, it starts blending it into a nice smooth gradient. You want to blend in the direction that the form is going. So this eyelid, for example, I'm blending across it in that same exact form. And remember, don't push too hard. If you push too hard, it's going to give you too much blur. So as you can see there, it just starts to kind of muddy everything together, and we don't necessarily want that. We want more control. So I'll go ahead and undo that. We just want to very lightly come across here like this. Let me bring that size down a little bit. We just want a little bit at a time. Just start smudging all these colors together. We can even start smudging the edges just to get a little bit more of a painter look. And what we're doing is we're just blending these colors. Now, there's a lot of different ways to blend colors, and we're going to get into those later in this course. But for now, we're going to go with this because this is the simplest way to blend, is to first paint with a transparent paint and layer up those transparencies like we did before with these colors, and then go back with a smudge tool and just kind of smudge them together to really finish it off. We can go ahead and start smudging some of the white of the eye together. And then in some areas where you need it to be a little bit heavier on the smudging, just go ahead and push harder. So like right here, for example, push a little bit harder and get a nicer blend. Same with down here. All right, great. So now that we have that all blended, now what we want to do is we want to go in and start adding darker colors. So using my eyedropper tool once again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select this dark brown color right here. And we're going to use that to start drawing in some more detail. So let's go ahead and switch back to the brush tool, and still using a round brush with the pressure sensitivity, we're going to go ahead and just start painting in a ring around the iris. So as you can see, I'm not necessarily painting it in one big swoop. I'm doing it a little bit at a time, just kind of drawing little curved lines together and layering them like this. We can come back and layer that in a little bit more. And it's okay if the edges are a little bit soft and a little bit blended. The iris doesn't actually have a very hard edge. If you look at it closely, it actually sort of fades into the white of the eye in a little short gradient. So it's okay if it kind of blends in a little bit. Now let's go ahead and do the top of the iris like this. And because of the way the iris is, it's kind of like a bowl. And so when it's being lit, one side is going to be in shadow. So the side that's not being hit by any light is going to be in shadow, which tends to be the top side if the light is coming from above. And then this under area down here is going to stay in light. So we want to shade it in like this. So again, you're just using your pressure to control the shading. So the harder you push, the darker and more opaque it'll be. And the lighter you push, the more transparent that paint will come out. So you want to make sure that you're controlling that. Now, if you're having a hard time with this, don't worry, we're going to go over all this in the course. This is all just to test your skills and to also just give you a taste of digital painting. So don't worry if your painting doesn't turn out perfect or look exactly like mine. We can go ahead and fill in the iris so you can still kind of see the original brownish orange drawing. So we're just going to use it as a guide and go ahead and draw in that iris, just like that. We can go ahead and darken in this upper eyelid ledge as well. I'm going to go ahead and bring my brush size down a little bit just to get a little bit of a thinner brush. And we'll bring that all the way down into the tear duct. Another place where we're going to want a little bit of darker paint is right here on the upper eyelid crease. Because in that area, we're going to get a nice dark crease. And in those creases, there's no light that can get into those areas. So it's kind of similar to two walls that meet in the corner of a room, where even though there's light in the room and there's light hitting those corners, there's not as much surface for the light to bounce around. And so it actually gets darker in the corners of those rooms. It's the same concept. I'm not pushing very hard. I don't want this to be too dark. You can go ahead and bring my brush size up. And we're still using this brown right here, just so you know. And I'm going to go ahead and lightly just start shading this all in a little bit darker. And you'll start to learn throughout this course that digital painting is all about layering. All right, great. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a little bit more color in here. So using my eyedropper tool, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this light orange sort of peach color. Bring my brush size down, and I'm going to start by painting in some of this color right here on the ledge of the bottom eyelid. You can bring that size up a little bit. I'm going to add some of that down here, maybe a little bit right there. Can add some there and there. So I'm just going to add little touches of this. As we start to layer more paint on, it'll start to disappear, but it'll create what's called an undertone. Undertones are really important for painting, especially when you're painting something like the skin tone that's slightly transparent, and you can see things like blood and veins and stuff like that through the skin. Slowly layer that on just lightly over this top area. And that might be a little bit too much, so using my eyedropper, I'll select my original skin tone color, and I'll just kind of neutralize that a little bit more by doing some light layers over the top of that color that I just added. Now at this point, we can go ahead and kind of start adding a skin tone overlay over everything, because we want to kind of soften everything up a little bit more. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to go ahead and select this color right here. So next to our orange color, I'm going to go ahead and select that. And what we can do with this is we can start to overlay some skin tone over some of these areas that look a little bit exaggerated. So down here, this orange, it makes a person look like they're kind of sick. So we don't want it to be so red or so orange. So we're just gonna, without putting too much pressure, just very lightly shade in some of the skin tone over these colors, such as the blue over here. We don't want to see that much blue. We can shade over this shadow a little bit more. I can bring my size down. I'll do a little bit up in here. Okay, great. So now it's starting to come together a little bit more, but there's a lot more work to do, a lot more blending. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to start adding in like touch-up colors, touch-up values, stuff like that. So for example, I know like right here, there needs to be a little bit more of a highlight. So what I'll do is I'll use my color picker tool, and I'm going to select whatever color I see there. So right there, I'm selecting that color. And now what we can do is we can come over here into our color tray, and we can go ahead and drag that up a little bit just to get a bit of a lighter color. So now our color is a little bit lighter, and you'll see that it appears lighter when I paint there. So I'll go ahead and undo that. And what I want to do is I just want to paint in just very softly a little bit of a highlight up here in this top area. We can add a little bit down here as well, just like that. And that starts to make that pop out. Let's try that again. So I'm going to go ahead and take my eyedropper tool or my color selection tool, and I'll select this color right here, right above the iris on the eyelid. And now over here, it's changed it to that color. And all I have to do is just drag that up a little bit lighter. And now I can paint with that color, and I can add more of a highlight right up here on the top of the eyelid. And I will actually drag that up just a little bit more and add just a tiny bit more of a lighter highlight, just like that. All right, great. Now we can also do things like blending. So another way we can blend in our software is if we use our color picker tool, and let's say we pick this color right here, I can go ahead and now paint with that very lightly, so I'm not adding very much pressure. So I get this transparent version of that color that overlays onto this darker color right next to it. So you can see, if I zoom in, you can see that we have the original color there, which I took a color picker and I chose that color, and then I painted right here, but I didn't put very much pressure, so it became transparent. And so it blended with this color right here that I painted on top of. So now we have an in-between color between these two colors. So what I can do now is, using my color picker, I'll pick that in-between color, and then I can go ahead and paint with that to help blend these together. Just like that. Now, if this is a little bit complicated, don't worry. Just try your best to follow along. Later in the course, we're going to cover this in depth, and you'll really learn how to blend and create this effect. So let's go ahead and let's continue on. So I'm seeing that there's some areas where I want to add more shadow. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and select this dark brown color once again, and I'm just going to go ahead and paint in some shadow back up into this area, because it became a little bit too light for me once we added in that skin tone on top of it. So I'm just lightly, without pushing too hard, just sort of shading that back in. You can add a little bit of shadow over here as well. And actually for this, what I'll do is I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to go ahead and use this color right here. So the color next to our original skin tone, and I'll use that to shade in the sides of the eyelid. I can add a little bit of that up here just to kind of bring it together a little bit more with the colors. And we can also go ahead and shade in right here, because this top eyelid would be casting a little bit of a shadow onto this bottom eyelid ledge. And you know what? We actually might be getting a little bit more of a brown color, so I'll come back to this brown color here and add some of that brown in there for the shadow. All right, great. Now another place where we're probably going to be getting shadow is right here underneath the eyelid. So I'm going to go ahead and shade this in a little bit more. And the reason for this is because the eyelid is pretty thick. You can see down here on the bottom eyelid, we can see this ledge. On the top, it's the same way. It's just we can't really see it because of the angle we're looking at the eye, but it casts a little bit of a shadow. So we're going to go ahead and shade it in with a little bit of this dark brown, just like so. Then let's go ahead and let's switch to our smudge tool, and let's kind of smudge all this together, just to kind of get a nice blend. Now you'll notice the brush tip that I'm using. So if we come up here into our brushes, there's all kinds of different brush tips, and depending on your software or what brushes you've downloaded, try to use something that is a little bit more textured like I'm using. It creates a little bit more of a painterly sort of smudge effect. All right, now we can go ahead and go back in there with our color picker. And what we want to do is we want to kind of clean some of this smudging up. So what I mean by this is we can go ahead and select this color right here at the top of the eyelid. And then just switching back to my brush tool, I'm going to go ahead and clean that up by just making that a little bit more of a defined line and kind of getting some of that darker color back out of there. I can do the same thing by selecting this dark color up here and using my brush tool. I'll just go ahead and paint that back in a little bit more. I can do that all the way across the top. And that just kind of cleans it up and brings some of those sharper lines back in to focus. Now over here on the sides of the eyelid, I feel like those are a little bit too dark. So what I'll do is I'll select this color right here, or a color from the eyelid that's a little bit lighter. And I'm just going to very lightly add that color back in over the top. And then I can go ahead and take my color picker. So I'm going to pick this color right here where we kind of blended these two colors together and go back over that. And that just kind of gives me more of a stronger color, more opaque color that doesn't have that weird transparent look. And we want to also add a little bit of shadow onto this upper eyelid area from the top brow. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll select one of these darker colors from the top brow, and I can go ahead and just kind of shade in a shadow like this that overhangs onto that eyelid, just like that. And using my color picker, I'll select that color. So now I can paint with it as more of an opaque color. I can push all the way and it's still the same color. And we're kind of losing that dark crease in there. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just select this dark brown once again. And with a very small brush, I'll go in there and I'll just paint that back in. All right, the last thing I want to do before I end this lecture is I want to add a little bit of color into the iris. So using my color picker, let's go ahead and select this yellow color here in our color palette. I'm going to bring my brush up to about that size, maybe a little bit bigger. And then I'm just going to go ahead and brush in a little bit of this yellow right down here in this highlighted area of the iris. And I'll do the same thing on this other side. And I'm not pushing very hard. I want to keep it kind of transparent. So just something like that. And this is going to start giving us a nice golden eye. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So we really blocked in all of our colors and a lot of our highlights and shadows. In the next lecture, we're going to go ahead and further blend this out a little bit more and add in all of our details, such as the details in the iris, the eyelashes, and the reflections. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lecture.